The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Tell Us Why, a podcast for the financial freedom community. If you're looking to succeed in your quest for financial freedom, make sure you join us every week as we, along with our guests, discuss different stories of success, how they were achieved, and how you can do the same. And of course, we ask them to tell us why. Here are your hosts, Jack and Mike.
Welcome to the Tell Us Why podcast. I am your host, Jack Dalrymple, here alongside my co-host, Mr. Michael Ketchen. Today we are talking with Tom Freezepops Carroll, co-host of the Great Dane Nation with Pro Football Hall of Fame kicker Morton Anderson.
Unbelievable.
That's kind of cool.
It is amazing. It's awesome. Can't wait.
But before we bring Freezepops in studio, Mike, what's going on in the business?
So we are pretty excited. This week we added a team member, and that's been great to kind of scale. And we're also spending some time and talking to the CPA and everything else going on. As everyone knows, estates law is being talked about changing, tax law, things like that. So it's a good time to reach out, refine your systems. Don't wait to the end of the year to talk to your CPA. Be proactive so you're not left with a very unpleasant large tax bill surprise at the end of the year.
I got a standing meeting set up with our CPA.
You need to get it going.
Next week after vacation. But
after vacation.
After vacation.
What do you got going on?
There's a lot going on right now. The construction on the new purchase is done. Done. So
it's fast. It's impressive.
2-3 months. Yeah, that was pretty quick.
I like it.
I'm very happy with that. On a negative note, got a hurricane going through Tampa, so that's always concerning.
Oh boy.
I think everything's buttoned up, but that's that. You just got to kind of get a roll with the punches on that one. And on another note, today's survival day for me and my buddy. So we were in London during the terrorist attack. Bus blew up right in front of my hotel 5 minutes after I walked by it.
Oh, my God.
Which is kind of concerning. I mean, there was, 3 bombs that day? So kind of just happened to be alive today. And the worst part of that was that everything in London closed. And being a diabetic, I legitimately almost died that night.
So you had a crazy...
Twice.
So,
oh, wow.
Minus the bombs, I legitimately almost died.
Happy survival day.
Yeah, so it's great. I'm just happy to be alive right
Today,
now.
July 7th?
Yeah,
so moving forward, forget the 4th of July. It's Happy Survival Day with Jack Dalrymple. Moving forward, we will be celebrating that.
So
that's
happy to be
unbelievable.
here. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm also happy, as we mentioned. We have a guest today. I am a diehard football fan, as you might have heard, because my man love for Tom Brady is not hidden at this point.
Oh, really?
He is the greatest human being of all time. I'm on record with that.
Is he? Okay.
So before we get to that and get to this great guest, though, what do we got to do? We got to hear who...
Hear from today's sponsor.
That's right. They pay the bills.
Are you sick of being treated like just another number by large insurance companies? Do you want a more personalized experience with somebody that you can trust? With Keith Monty from Boynton's Insurance, that's exactly what you'll get. Keith is an experienced professional who can design an insurance plan tailored to fit your specific needs. With access to over 30 insurance carriers, Keith is able to shop numerous markets to find a price that works for you. So if you want an insurance agent that you can rely on and one that has your best interests at heart, then call or text Keith today on 978-241-2363. That's 978-241-2363. Keith Monty. He'll get you covered.
All right. Like I've alluded, we've got a very special guest today. This individual is a close personal friend of our executive producer, Jake Bennett. A little shout out to Jake. Hailing from the great state of Rhode Island, our next guest got his radio started at Emerson College, where he co-hosted the Man Cave for WECB. I definitely listened to that a couple of times. But he interned for such places as WEI, Fox Sports Radio, and the Boston Bruins. No big deal. And his resume includes ESPN 98.5, the Sports Hub, and 101 ESPN St. Louis. He's now host of the Great Dane Nation with Pro Football Hall of Fame kicker Morton Anderson and a Draftkings contributor, Freezepops. Welcome to the Tell Us Why podcast.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. I don't know how I follow up that Survivor story, though.
Yeah, he just dropped it on me anywhere.
Well, I got a text like an hour ago from my buddy. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot
Survival
about
Day.
that.
So now we're going to feel Survival Day, because before we get into all the warm and fuzzy and feel great, I don't know you like Jack and Jake do. Freezepops? Like, are you insulted from calling you this? Like, what's going on here? Give me the story here. Where is this coming from?
This is such an awesome story. I love this story.
Term of endearment, I'd say.
Term of endearment. Okay.
So when I started at ESPN, it was about a year or so after I graduated college, 22 years old, kind of a dummy, as we all are at 22. Still am kind of a dummy, but I can fake it better now. And I wanted to be like the nice new guy on the scene. So I was trying to think of, okay, how do I get people to like me? And I like food personally, so I started with free food. So it was the summer, it was hot, and I decided to bring in a pack of Freezepops for the department. And I threw it in the freezer in the green room, and I sent out an email to what I thought was just my department saying, hey, just put some Freezepops in the freezer, everyone help yourself. Come to find out, the distribution list, ESPN Radio All, is not just the 40 people that work in Bristol, Connecticut. It is 9,000 people internationally that received this email. And people in Brazil got this email, LA, Chicago, Honolulu, Austin, Texas. I was getting replies from all these people. There's no Freezepops in our and then all the people in Bristol were mad at me because they were like, why would you send that email out before the Freezepops were even frozen? Tube of liquid? Like, what are we doing here?
Great plan, terrible execution.
That's the best part, though, when it unfreezes.
My 10th day at work, and, I made it through, and, of course, the name naturally comes from that, Tommy Freezepops, and it has stuck with me ever since. I've worked multiple places since then. And there's always like one person that knows a guy, someone that knows a guy that carries that nickname on.
That's the guy.
So it's not a bad. Honestly, when you work in the radio or podcast space, if you have a nickname like that, you don't lose it ever. So,
yes,
I love it.
It is what it is.
Embrace it.
That is amazing. We have a couple of nicknames for producer Chrissy too. We don't know if we got any that good, but we'll keep working on those. Chiming in there. We all love Chrissy. We're just kidding, Chrissy.
It's not PG, so
I was going to say, we let us say them on air.
Oh boy. All right, before we go completely off the rails here, Tommy, again, thank you for being here. Appreciate the time. Jack, as I mentioned, and Jake, our executive producer, gave us a little overview. So why don't we tell the folks at home where you're at today in your business, and then we'll work backwards through this fascinating story. What do you got going on? What are you doing today?
So, like you guys mentioned, I co-host a podcast for Vegas Insider called Great Dane Nation. It's with the Great Dane himself, Morton Anderson. He's only the second kicker to be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's a once-a-week podcast. We talk to the greatest players and coaches in the history of the game. And we also have a segment dedicated to Vegas Insider content. So I spearhead that segment week to week, talking with the handicappers, helping out our listeners with their investments. Sports gambling is important. It's something that people are getting more and more into.
Oh, yeah.
The casual sports fan is embracing it more. So we're happy to provide both the awesome interview kind of classic content that you're looking for in sports media, but also this gambling stuff and, marrying it together. It's kind of the perfect package for a football fan week to week. We're having a lot of fun with it. We're 44 episodes in at this point.
Wow.
And we helped start it from the ground up here, and we love our growth so far. It's been a ton of fun. And I also work for Draftkings as a on-air contributor, and this is sort of a hard thing to explain, but just bear with me. And I know some of you guys out there probably know what I'm talking about. So when the pandemic started, there was no sports, and Draftkings, they live off of sports.
They need sports. They need sports to make money.
Sports. You can't gamble on sports if there's no sports.
Yep.
And they were like, okay, how do we make something for people to gamble on? And the idea came up of Madden simulations. So you know how in Madden, if you don't touch the remote for long enough, the computer will just start playing itself? Someone had the idea of broadcasting those simulations and allowing people to build DFS lineups for each of these Madden simulations. And in presenting those on YouTube, they wanted to have a play-by-play and color commentator on each broadcast to kind of help tie everything together in the DraftKings brand and keep everything going and, a Draftkings presentation. So I knew someone from going to Emerson. She was a producer at Draftkings. She hit me up. She said, I think you'd be perfect for this. And I became a color commentator for Madden simulations on Draftkings.
That is my dream job.
I did not realize that's how that
30
developed.
broadcasts a month for this.
I didn't realize that was a pandemic-inspired event. I watched a couple of them, and I just assumed that's just, I was assuming I just didn't know about it. It's been going on since Madden started.
Wow.
Well, I think there's been iterations of this, but it was always people playing against each other.
Yep.
This is the computer is fully in charge, and it was a pandemic baby, and it's just over a year old now. I've been a part of the baby's life since about last October.
Can we?
And it's been a ton of fun. I love doing it. It's kind of a non-traditional broadcast. It has sort of play-by-play elements, but it's really like a live podcast feel.
Yes.
There's live chat going on YouTube the whole time.
Yeah.
We're interacting with our audience. We create contests as broadcasters for the DK Sim fam, as they call themselves. And it's a great community. It's a ton of fun. So I love what I'm doing right now with this podcast and working for DraftKings. It's good times. The pandemic allowed me to be remote, which is really cool. I never thought I'd be like a remote employee, but having the ability to kind of live where I want and do everything from home has been awesome.
Well, and I want to jump in right there with a question, because now we're kind of so many things there to unpack that are kind of unique to our community, what we've done. I'll let you, I know you got a lot you want to get to as well. But the first thing I want to hit on there, and I guess I didn't think of it initially, is DraftKings is an established brand, okay? What was it like? We're entrepreneurs here. We're business people. We're building a community. You have the backing of this established brand, but you're really going out here and saying, now be creative, be entertaining, and actually increase our bottom line. What was that process like from almost the psychology and, we always talk about bettering yourself here, that mindset. How were you kind of attacking that, saying, I have to be entertaining, I have to be good at this, and I also have to move the bottom line. This has to make money or this is going to get the plug pulled. And it's become a success. Obviously, a year later, they're still doing it. What was that like going through that? Did you feel any pressure? What did you draw on for that? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so, when the pandemic happened, like I mentioned, sports stopped for a while. So the whole industry had to get creative. And when that initially happened in March of last year, I was still working on the ESPN affiliate out here in St. Louis on the morning show. So from my vantage point, it was like, okay, we still need to do 3 hours of radio every day. We still need to have compelling enough content for people to continue to listen, even though they're not driving to work.
Yep.
And we need to have enough listeners for advertisers to still be handing over gobs of money to us.
Yep.
And it was a challenge. It was really, really hard because you can only talk about this day in history so many times in a row before people stop caring. Like if they want this day in history, they can go to Wikipedia and read the Wikipedia page themselves. So it was really, really difficult, but that the whole industry sort of, they had that life raft few months there of trying to decide, okay, what are people interested that we can draw on from the past? What's some interesting stuff that we can try and do? I'm sure you guys remember, or maybe you don't, because I didn't even think this was very good because I watched it, but the NBA did like a horse competition.
Oh, it was
like
awful.
All sorts of stuff. I think ESPN 8, the Ocho came out of retirement. They did some stuff.
God.
Like it was just a weird time for the sports industry because all these ad dollars needed to be,
justified.
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
yeah.
So there needed to be content to go with this money. So I know with talking with people at DraftKings, it's sort of because I came on a few months after. It was something that was born out of just one person's idea, and they just ran with it. They hit up EA Sports. They saw it as good, exposure for them because they knew sports fans were clamoring for something. So
anything,
all these people,
and it's new, it's authentic. It's giving everything. It's new. There's nothing like it. And to your point, it's not ESPN Classic.
Right,
yeah, it's new stuff, and that's just unbelievable to me. I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
And I know the guys that were with the Dream Stream team from day one, they were a little bit nervous for sure because it was such a new frontier. And they were going super play-by-play heavy, like treating it like a real broadcast, building out broadcast boards and everything, like pretending like they're Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. And it took them a few weeks to realize, like, what people like. They don't.
We're here to gamble, man.
It's a unique thing, yeah. Like they want you to be interacting with this YouTube chat going on. Like that, it was a unique experience that's sort of been built by the audience. Almost, it's been fascinating. Like they've adjusted. Like it's been cool to be at a company where when the audience sends along a complaint or like a suggestion, we actually then talk about all of these suggestions in a monthly Zoom meeting and decide which ones, we're going to actually pursue and which ones we don't. Whereas every other job I've ever gone to, the complaint box, the digital complaint box, no one ever checks that. No one cares.
It's a trash barrel.
What the listeners actually, are suggesting or complaining about. But Draftkings, it's kind of helped shape the dream stream, which has been really cool.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. So that must lead, I imagine, because you touched on it. You have, one of the reasons we're excited to get you on is you had what a lot of people consider a dream job. I mean, you're working for ESPN, you're doing these things. You make that mindset shift. You go over to a podcast that's a startup. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's risky. We're doing it right now. We're taking time out of our investing career because we believe building this community is worth it. But there is a risk associated with that. Now add to that, you're doing it during a pandemic. I mean, what is that like psychologically? Did you have people saying you're nuts, stick with traditional radio, you don't know what's coming? What has it been like building that brand, betting on yourself, and taking that action?
So I was in an interesting position. A lot of people were in this position last year where I didn't have necessarily a choice. My job went away. My parent company decided that they didn't want to pay full-time producers like myself that were making a certain amount. They didn't want to pay those people anymore. They wanted to pay part-time people to do 3 people's jobs. Wow. So I was decided, they were like, you know what? We don't need Tom. Sorry. They did need me, but they couldn't afford to have me anymore because it was a really, really tough time for the radio industry. And there's thousands of stories like this across the country because of the pandemic. So last June, I had my last day of work in sports radio, and I sat back and I said, okay, this sucks because there's a pandemic. There's thousands of people getting laid off, so it's not like there's tons of jobs laying around for me. So I took a few weeks to myself to sort of think about what my plan of attack would be, and I hit up all the people that I thought might be able to help me in the industry, and I got a lot of the same answer, like, hey, sorry, wish I could, but there's nothing right now. Mm-hmm. And that was a hard pill to swallow because I had felt like I had built a really strong resume and a really strong network, and I don't want to say I was cocky, but I just thought there would be more bites earlier. Mm-hmm. And probably the first 4 weeks I was out of a job. It was scary. I didn't verbalize it a lot, but definitely internally I was like, I might need to make a pivot here soon. Mm-hmm. And I actually had real conversations with friends that work for tech companies like, hey, is there a need for someone like me that has this media background at these types of places? And I thought about it. I thought about making a shift. As heartbreaking as that would have been for me, it just, you need to survive sometimes. Yep. And by the grace of God, this amazing opportunity came out of the sky. And, I mentioned earlier, or maybe I forget if I mentioned this yet or not, but I went to Emerson College in Boston, and they have a really strong alumni network. And there's a Facebook page called the Emerson Mafia that alumni just post jobs nonstop on there. Yep. All day, every day, there's just job postings. And the way my Facebook is set up is if I have a friend that posts in that group, I get notified. So a kid I went to Emerson with, who I had classes with freshman year, I didn't stay in touch with him, but he posted a position. It said, hey, looking to hire someone who has sports radio experience, can do some on-air stuff, and help us launch a podcast with a Hall of Famer from the NFL. Wow. Sitting there going, that's perfect.
I want to do that.
Exactly a job I can do.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I had been wanting to switch over to podcasts for years. I knew that sports radio was sort of on the down tick, and podcasts are the way of the future. I for 5 years have been trying to get into podcasting full time, and every radio job I've had, I've tried to do as much podcast work as possible to make myself a candidate
Familiar with it,
to get a full time podcast spot. So it was just, I think that it was lucky, but at the same time, you kind of make your own luck. And I was ready for that job when it popped up, and I bombarded this guy with messages right away. Hey, I'm your guy for this. This is everything that I can do. This is why I'm the perfect guy. This is how much I'll work for. Take it or leave it, basically.
Being assertive, going and get it. Yeah.
I went through a couple rounds of interviews. It was down between me and another guy, and they liked my proposal better than the other guys, and here I am. And it's been fantastic. It was sort of a whirlwind. It was scary, but I guess everything happens for a reason. And I feel like I was meant to be at this spot at this point in my life. It's been really, really cool.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great.
It's an awesome story. Yeah.
So moving on to where you're headed, I know this podcast is obviously, it's been great. Like I thoroughly enjoy it. So thank you for that. But I know last November you got engaged. I know I saw recently something on social media that you're headed back to Rhode Island. How has this podcast allowed you to do that? Is it I'm assuming there's some time freedom accompanying the podcast role and allows you that flexibility?
Yeah, being a remote employee has been a godsend in that regard. I don't need to be at a studio every day at a certain time, and when the light goes on, I need to be ready to go for 3 hours, and then you're on the hamster wheel every single day trying to book 3 high-profile guests for a mid-market sports radio show. If you're market 23 and your hosts and bosses want you to book guests like you're a market 10, it's hard. It was a grind, and you're waking up at 3 a.m. every day, and it's just an absolute brutal situation. So getting into the podcast space where it doesn't matter where I live, as long as the podcast is posted at this time every week, you can work at your own pace, and obviously you have to record when you can record based on guest schedules and when Morton can record. Obviously, we're flexible. Having that flexibility allows me to actually feel like I have my life back, to be honest. I mean, when you're producing morning radio at the level that I was at, you are a slave to your job.
Yeah.
And I am infinitely happier not doing that. So it was such a blessing in disguise, losing that job. Such a blessing in disguise. It allowed me to be in this space, because if I don't lose that job, I probably am not even in the mindset of looking for a job like this at that point, because it is the pandemic. I would have been so focused on keeping that job and trying to keep the radio show going, not even thinking about what's going on in the industry. But I got lucky, man. I did. I really did.
Well, and again, I want to say a lot of things to recap all that for the community we're talking about. One, you didn't get lucky. You made your own luck, because we get into that. And the message we want everyone to take away here is he bet on himself. He went back to his network, which he established and stayed in touch with. He leveraged systems through something you set up on social media. You took action. You were assertive, and you pivoted from that fear mindset to that growth mindset. And as a result of that, I mean, here you are in 1 year, you're going from traditional job, being a slave to the job, for lack of a better word. They're dangling the carrot of the salary. Oh, you've got this good job. You got to wake up. You can't leave, though, because you get to live your 2 weeks of vacation. They flip the script for you. Now you got to get after it yourself. And that leads right into what we want to talk about next. Is it's all working out now. And you weren't lucky. You did it yourself. What has it been like building this brand? And trust me, we're going to get our notepad for this one because we're going through it. What is it like building the brand, building the community? Talk to us a little bit about that. And for the people at home who are interested, because right now branding, in my opinion, in the next 20 years, it's going to be more valuable than a college degree. That's one of the reasons we're doing this now as entrepreneurs, is I believe lenders and people like that are going to start looking at these exact kind of things and the value that's tangible. So how have you guys done that?
It is the hardest thing in media to do to grow your business. But I think it's number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on that list. It is the hardest thing to do because ultimately, at a certain point, if you have someone financing you and you're not showing growth of audience, there's not going to be an incentive to continue to finance you. So there's pressure. There's no doubt there's pressure. Now, we are lucky to be associated with a company that's focused on allowing us to really build the content and have the content be as good as it can be at this point. And the audience will continue to slowly grow with us as our content continues to stay strong. And the early returns on that have been very positive. Our focus right now, and it has been since day one, is just being the best podcast we can be week to week. There's not a lot of worrying about what it's going to be in 3 years or 5 years. It's week to week. How can we be the best episode we can possibly be? And
we should try that.
It's really helped us out a lot because when you're focusing on each episode, you're saying, okay, how can I amplify this content? And you say, okay, I'm going to reach out to this set of people through PR because this specific player is going to resonate in these markets. And then those eyeballs and ears are going to want to come listen to what he had to say. And then maybe if we retain 10% of those people, that would be actually a really high number. If we retain 2% of the people that discover our audience through traditional PR like that, that's a win. And then you just continue to kind of grow slowly there. What cuts are going to resonate on social media that are going to translate into subscribers. And it's just a slow build that way. Obviously there's planning involved. We're looking weeks out. So this isn't like we start from scratch each Monday type of thing, but it's having a focus on episode to episode growth that has been very, very important for us. And Better Collective, our parent company, when sports gambling became legal, whatever year it was, 2017, 2018, they swooped into the United States and bought a bunch of sports gambling brands. And at the time, the brand that they spent the most money on was Vegas Insider. But they've been, I don't know what the word is. They've been really, really intentional with every move they've made with Vegas Insider as far as trying to relaunch it and have it be like a real player in the media space as this gambling space becomes more and more important. And it's been cool to be a part of a team that isn't rushing everything. They're really worried about doing it correctly. And I say worried might not be the right word, but it's important to them that everything be done correctly and have a specific result attached to it instead of just trying to put out your daily fires and keep up with the other guy. It's important to them to have their content be really good and then figure out how the aesthetics look and just business end. It's a slower process and they're comfortable with that. And they just recently acquired Action Network for $240 million.
Wow.
So that's been another cool part of being on this team is you see this business that has been incredibly successful, what they've done for years over in Europe, implementing that same mindset in the American market. And then they go out and outbid these huge companies for Action Network, who is already a real player in this space here in America and have been really since they launched. So I don't even know where we started, but it's just been really, really nice to be on a team that allows us to build at the pace that we're building at.
That's great. That's unbelievable. We got a lot of actionable steps that apply to ourselves and I think anybody building the business really.
Kind of relates to our addicted to problem solving segment. I think we just went over it, but
Yes.
So an anonymous user, I think his name was Jack D. I don't know who he is. Here is very good looking, but the question was, what's the best way to grow a podcast? I don't know where that came from. I think it was Facebook, but I think we touched on that, so we can glance over it. And you want to move on to the big three?
I think we're ready. We're going to put him on the hot seat.
Hot seat. Here it is.
All right.
So these are the questions we ask every guest every week. And we're going to start with the college question. So in your opinion, is college worth it?
For me, it is, and it was. And I think in certain industries, it is important because if you do it correctly, you can use it as a networking tool to get your career started and help you throughout your career. I mean, I leaned on it 7 years into my career, the same way I leaned on it when I was graduating. You know, I didn't have any sort of resume that was worthy of a great job when I first graduated. Yeah, I had some nice internships, but everyone has nice internships, you know, generally speaking, when you're going for these entry-level jobs. It was having that Emerson degree that allowed me to get maybe a second look at my resume, because there's so many other Emerson grads working in this space around the country. So for me personally, having the Emerson connection super important has been for a lot of the jobs I've had in this industry. And the two current jobs I have are because I went to Emerson and had those connections. So without question, super important for me. But I can totally see why someone who isn't working in a space where networking is as important wouldn't need to go to college. And, you know, you can sort of go to the school of hard knocks, as my grandpa used to say. He took pride in the fact that he didn't go to college and just sort of made it happen on his own. And for me it was, but I can totally see why someone wouldn't need to and can get there on their own. I
like it. That's awesome. So the next question we ask is, what's one piece of actionable advice you go back and give to your 18-year-old self?
This is a tough one. I think I would tell my 18-year-old self to actually take seriously the end of high school. Like, you know, finish strong. Finish the way I started, because I definitely got a bad case of senioritis right around the middle of my junior year of high school.
Freshman year, yeah.
By the end of junior year, I was probably 40th in my class or something like that. And by the time I graduated, I didn't even look at my class rank. They handed
40 out of 45. That's not too bad, though.
Right. Whenever you graduated at my high school, at least they did it this year. I don't know if they do it like this every year, but you grab your diploma and then you all go back into like the gym and they handed us our final report cards. I literally just grabbed my final report card with both hands and crumpled it up into a ball and didn't even look at it, because I was like, I don't even want to see how bad it ended up for me. Because I mentioned how important Emerson was. I didn't start at Emerson. I was initially waitlisted at Emerson. And it was because I was a knucklehead to finish out high school. They saw the grades declining, and they were like, you know, we're going to waitlist you. We're not going to let you come here right away. So I went to Assumption College in Worcester for one semester. And had I not goofed around as much to end high school, I would have been I would have been at Emerson from the start. Now, in hindsight, it's weird because I would give myself that advice, but I'm also completely content with my path, because that mistake in high school that led me to go into Assumption, that was important. Like I needed to learn that lesson. I mean, I went to Assumption. I was on the football team, and it didn't even have my major, and I just was like, what am I doing here? Well, this is not what I want to do with my life. And I got hurt during training camp, and I was like, this is just not for me at all. And I called Emerson after I was, having this epiphany in the trainer's room, and said, hey, I know I got waitlisted. I just got injured. this is not the school I want to be at. What are the chances that if I reapply, I'll get in? And they said, if you do really well for the first half of your semester here, like, this is our acceptance rate for students that profile like you. They were very brutally honest with me. And I said, okay, sounds good. So I just went balls to the wall and beasted all of my classes at Assumption. Like, had straight A's when I applied for reacceptance or to be off their wait list at Emerson. And they accepted me. So the nice thing about that is when you find out that you're accepted mid-semester, then all you need to do is pass your classes for those credits to transfer. It doesn't matter what grade you get. So then I was chilling the rest of those first few months. I was like, I went hard. Now I'm going to relax. Yeah, it was an important experience for me to kind of learn, your actions do have consequences.
Yeah, the takeaway there, I wanted to jump in before we get to the next question, is we asked that question for exactly what you just said. It's not so much, that, I don't regret it as much as you had the mindset to recognize the mistake and then take action to correct it rather than compound it. So one of the reasons we always ask that question is that right there. It's we all have these pivotal moments, and we're all going to go through stuff. It's what we do with the experiences and where we go with them after that have that. So that was a great answer, great example.
Yeah, keeping it on the 18-year-old note, I think one of the things that most 18-year-olds are afraid to do is is fail or make a mistake. When you're 18 years old, you want to do everything right, get that safe, comfortable job. And sometimes failure is the best way to learn. So in that instance, it's kind of right up that alley.
Right.
But moving on to the last question, what is one thing you would want your 90-year-old self to say to you?
I mean, that's a way more difficult question, honestly.
That's why we do it.
What would I want my 90-year-old self to say? Why didn't you save more money?
Because you were playing on Draftkings Madden simulations with Mike and Jack.
It's an interesting question. I would love for my 90-year-old self to say, like, thank you for, living responsibly and having a good family and living a rich life. That's the goal, right? Live within your means and, get a job that's going to allow you to live comfortably and start a family and spend as much meaningful time with your loved ones as possible. And, don't be a bad person. It's a hard question, man.
Yeah,
I don't like this question. It's making me think.
Well, it is, but I don't
think hard. I work in sports.
That's it, though, Tommy. That's what we want to show everybody is you're the most down to earth, great, relatable guest. But you're also, and I said this to you before the show, and I said it to you last time. You're too humble. You don't give yourself enough credit. You are living life on your terms. Like I can't impart this on enough people. I know Jack talks about it. We're not anti-traditional job. We're not anti even corporate job. What we are anti is not living life on your terms because nothing is guaranteed. You have now carved out a life that I would say by my definition of success, you are already one of the most successful people I know. Success is not necessarily tied to money and wealth as much as it's tied to time freedom, lifestyle design, and then money and wealth do play a part of that. You are living every day. You are waking up excited and you're getting paid to do something that's entertaining and you're building something. You're building a brand. Yeah, like you're talking to Hall of Famer athletes. Like I watched the Charles Barkley episode because to his exact point, I'm sitting there going, hey, I'm his demographic. I went right to the Barkley episode because I go, this is going to be unbelievable. You're going to get to talk gambling with Charles Barkley? Like I'm dying to hear this, No,
I pinch myself often. Like I was watching TV with my fiance last night, and I got a text from. I'd been trying to work with Jerome Bettis about coming on the podcast, and I got Jerome Bettis like going back and forth with me through text about like figuring out a date and time.
Ask him why he can't beat the Patriots.
I just had to take a step back though, because I'm like, I'm 29 years old. He's one of the first players I remember being like awesome when I was a little kid. It's like, I'm texting with the bus right now. This is insane.
And you're getting paid for it.
Was he pissed he didn't make the top 7 on top 7 nickname podcast?
He unfortunately didn't make the cut. I didn't bring that up. It will be brought up on the podcast.
That's why I was texting you to give you shit.
All right, so before we let you go, where can people learn a little bit more about you? Where can they get a hold of you and follow? We'll put all this in the show description and show notes as well.
Okay,
so Chrissy does.
I'll just list out a bunch of stuff,
We will.
and you guys can tell me to shut up whenever you're ready for me to shut up. You can follow me on Twitter at yaboy TC Fresh, YABOI TC Fresh. Look, once that's your nickname for any amount of time on Twitter, you got to just stick with it. I've tried to change it before. People get mad at me. So that's where you find me on Twitter. You find our podcast on Twitter at Great Dane Nation, at your boy TC Fresh on Instagram, at Great Dane Nation VI on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Tommy Freezepops, and subscribe to Great Dane Nation anywhere you get your podcasts.
Absolutely.
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, wherever you guys listen to pods. Go check us out, subscribe, rate, review. We'd really appreciate it. And check out Vegas Insider's YouTube channel as well for the video version of the podcast.
We will be doing that. And the Draftkings Madden simulations too. Where can they check those out?
You can check those out on Draftkings YouTube channel, the Dream Stream, every day. We typically do 6 Madden simulations a day, starting from noon until about 11 o'clock at night Eastern. You can catch me on there almost every night. I'm usually in there in the 8 and 10 o'clock sims. And then if you turn it on the weekend, I'm basically like on 80% of them. I've become their weekend warrior over the last few months. So go ahead and check that out as well. It's a ton of fun. Once you guys watch one, you'll completely understand why this community exists. It's a lot of
That's
fun.
amazing.
I love it.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right.
So those of you, if you don't already follow us on social media, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything.
Everywhere.
All the links to both Tommy Freezepops and our social media is in the description below. Blacking out. If you're new and listening for the first time, make sure you head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe.
Click like, subscribe. And if you want to get some swag, check out the Tell Us Why swag shirt. Bet on yourself. Or if you even want to come out hang out in person, we're here every Wednesday at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe in Salem. We'll see you guys next week with another great episode.
And we'll end it with the quote of the week. This one is a Maya Angelou. Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it.
Well said.
That's it for today. Join us next for next week's episode. And until next week,
bet on yourself.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.